When nothing makes sense, let God's love guide you. Have you ever reached a moment when nothing makes sense anymore? When every answer disappears, and even your prayers sound like whispers fading into the dark? You've done everything you knew how to do. You waited, you trusted, you believed, and still, heaven feels silent. But maybe this silence isn't God's absence. Maybe it's His way of guiding you through a season where faith must walk without sight. Because sometimes when nothing makes sense, it's not confusion, it's direction. It's grace, wearing the disguise of mystery. When the world stops making sense, there comes a time when the ground beneath you shifts, quietly at first, then all at once. What once felt solid begins to tremble. You look at your life, and the pieces no longer fit where they used to. The prayers that once brought comfort now echo unanswered. You try to keep moving, but each step feels like walking through fog. You can't see what's ahead, and the light behind you has dimmed. You whisper questions into the silence, hoping for a sign. But heaven stays still. No thunder, no voice, no sudden miracle. Only the quiet, steady sound of your own heart, beating in the waiting. It's in that space between what you know and what you can't understand that faith is born again. Not the kind of faith built on results, but the kind that breathes in the dark. The kind that keeps whispering, "God, I still trust you," even when your mind can't explain why. We often think faith is the ability to move mountains. But sometimes faith is the grace to stand still when the mountain doesn't move. It's the courage to believe that even when life stops making sense, love still does. Because God's love doesn't depend on your understanding. It moves beyond it. Maybe that's what He's teaching you right now. How to see with your heart when your eyes can't. Maybe what feels like confusion is actually preparation. Maybe the unanswered prayer isn't rejection, it's protection. And maybe, just maybe, the silence you're hearing is God rearranging everything to work in your favor. You don't need to fix what's breaking. You don't need to understand the path. You just need to stay close. Even if all you can say is, "I'm here, Lord, and I'm tired." Because that honesty is where real faith begins. Faith isn't loud. It's often quiet, trembling, tearful. But heaven recognizes that sound. Heaven moves for that kind of trust. Look back for a moment. Can you see it? The times you thought you'd fall apart and somehow you didn't. The nights when you were certain you couldn't go on, but morning still came. The closed doors that broke your heart, but later revealed themselves as mercy in disguise. Those weren't coincidences. They were proof that even when you couldn't see God's hand, His love was still writing the story. And that story isn't over yet. You are standing in the middle of a divine mystery, not because you're lost, but because you're being led. Faith is not the absence of confusion. It's trusting that even chaos can't cancel God's plan. You are walking through a season that will one day make perfect sense, not because the pain disappears, but because purpose will rise from it. So tonight, instead of asking for answers, ask for peace. Ask for stillness. Ask for the courage to stay when your instinct is to run. Ask for the wisdom to see that confusion doesn't mean you're abandoned. It means you're being invited to trust deeper than before. Because in the space where nothing makes sense, love becomes your compass. And when the world stops making sense, that's often the moment heaven starts to move. You're not being forgotten. You're being guided, one unseen step at a time. And someday soon, when the fog lifts and light floods in again, you'll look back and realize that what once felt like silence was actually God leading you home. The unseen hand, the hidden work of God. There are moments when you look around and it seems as though heaven has stopped listening. You pray, you wait, you stretch your faith across the silence, and yet nothing moves. It's easy to assume that God has gone quiet, that maybe you took a wrong turn somewhere along the way. But what if the quiet isn't the absence of His work? What if it's the sound of it? Because God's hand doesn't always move in thunder. Sometimes it moves in whispers. You don't always hear it, but it's there, rebuilding what you thought was lost, redirecting what you thought was broken, and redeeming what you thought was wasted. He's not ignoring your pain. He's shaping it into something that will one day speak of his faithfulness. You see, when nothing seems to happen, everything is happening, just not where your eyes can see. He's rearranging the details, softening the hearts involved, shifting timing, aligning steps, preparing paths you haven't even dreamed of walking yet. He's working in places beyond your sight, because his plan is bigger than your understanding. It's like standing before a tapestry. The side you see looks like chaos, threads crossing over, tangled, frayed. But if you could see the other side, you'd realize that every strand, even the dark ones, are woven into something breathtaking. That's how God works. You see confusion, he sees completion. You see delay, he sees divine timing. You see silence, he hears progress. And maybe that's why he hasn't answered you yet. Not because he doesn't care, but because he's answering differently, deeper. He's not just fixing what's around you. He's healing what's within you. You wanted a quick solution. He's creating a lasting transformation. He's more interested in shaping your heart than satisfying your timeline. If he gave you everything you asked for right away, you'd never learn to trust him beyond the blessing. So instead, he teaches you to recognize his presence in the in-between. He hides his hand, not to punish you, but to grow you. Because faith that only functions when everything is clear isn't faith, it's certainty. And certainty never made anyone stronger. The unseen hand of God is not idle. It's the steady force holding everything in place while you're learning to let go. It's the breath that sustains you when your strength runs out. It's the quiet whisper that says, you don't have to see it to believe it. You only have to trust. Think back to the moments that didn't go your way, the opportunities that slipped through your fingers, the relationships that ended, the plans that collapsed. At the time, it hurt. You thought you had failed. But later, when time revealed what you couldn't yet see, you realized you were being redirected, not rejected. What if that's what's happening now? Maybe the door that closed was God's mercy. Maybe the silence is his shield. Maybe the waiting is his way of protecting you from running into something that would have broken you. You call it delay, but heaven calls it design. And as you sit in the middle of this unexplainable season, you begin to feel something you can't quite name. A calm that doesn't make sense. A peace that doesn't depend on understanding. That's the evidence. That's the unseen hand of God at work. It's easy to trust when the path is clear, but true peace is found when you trust in the fog. Because the fog forces you to slow down, to listen, to lean. It forces you to follow the faint light of his love instead of sprinting ahead with your own plans. So no, you're not forgotten. You're being guided by a hand so gentle it refuses to force its way. God isn't late. He's precise. He doesn't rush what he's perfecting. And when the time is right, everything that felt random will align like stars in the night, each piece shining exactly where it belongs. Until then, trust the unseen. Rest in the silence. Because what feels invisible is often the most powerful work of all, the invisible movement of a faithful God, turning confusion into clarity and waiting into wonder. And when you finally see it, when the puzzle pieces fall into place and the story makes sense, you'll realize he never stopped working. Not for a second. You just couldn't see his hands through the tears. The fog and the lantern, walking without seeing. There's a kind of fog that life brings, not the kind that hangs in the air, but the kind that settles over your soul. You can't see far ahead. You wake each morning and realize that the plans you once saw clearly are now hidden behind a veil of uncertainty. Every direction looks the same. Every choice feels like a risk. You whisper for guidance, but the silence lingers, and you start to wonder if maybe you've been left to find your own way. But then, a faint light. Small, almost fragile, but steady. It doesn't chase the fog away. It simply gives you enough glow for the next step. And as you walk toward that light, you realize something sacred. This is what faith really is. Not clarity, not control. Trusting the lantern, not the landscape. God rarely shows the whole path because if he did, you'd stop depending on his presence. Instead, he gives you small pieces of direction. One step, one moment, one heartbeat at a time. And it's in that rhythm that you learn the beauty of trust. You stop demanding to see the entire road and start finding peace in walking with the light itself. Sometimes, we mistake confusion for abandonment when it's actually invitation. The fog invites you to slow down, to listen, to lean closer. Because in the dark, you hear what the noise of certainty always drowned out. The whisper of God saying, "Keep going. You're not lost. You're learning how to follow." It's not easy. There are days when the fog thickens and you see nothing at all. No answers, no movement, no hope in sight. You'll want to stop, to turn back, to wait until it clears. But if you do, you'll miss the miracle that only happens in motion, the light that follows obedience. Each step you take in faith triggers something unseen. Heaven shifts, paths align, doors begin to open in silence. The miracle is not in the distance, it's in your next step. Because God's light doesn't travel ahead of you, it travels with you, and so you keep walking. The fog doesn't lift right away. Sometimes it stays for months, even years, but your eyes start to adjust to the rhythm of trust. You begin to realize that faith doesn't need clarity to move. It just needs love to lead, and love never leaves you stranded. Maybe that's the secret of the fog. It teaches you to walk by feeling, not by formula. It makes you pay attention to his presence rather than your plan. It turns your focus from the destination to the companion. You begin to sense that even though you don't know what tomorrow looks like, you know who's holding the lantern. And that's enough. You might not see where the path turns next, but you feel the warmth of his guidance. It's gentle, consistent, and always just enough. Because faith isn't about seeing the end. It's about trusting that the same hand that lit the lantern will also lead you home. The fog was never your enemy. It was your teacher. It showed you how to listen in silence, how to move when afraid, and how to depend on light you can't control. And someday, when the fog finally clears, you'll look back and realize that every step, even the ones that felt uncertain, were guided with precision. You didn't lose your way. You found a deeper one. So if you're walking through a fog right now, don't wait for the sky to clear before you trust. Hold the lantern. Take the step. You're not walking in circles, you're walking in grace. And the same light that glows before you now is the proof that you're not alone. Because even when you can't see the way, the light still knows where it's going. The silence of heaven, when God seems quiet. There are seasons when heaven goes quiet, or at least, that's how it feels. You pray the same prayer night after night until the words start to lose their shape. You beg for a sign, even a small one, but all you hear is stillness. And somewhere between faith and fatigue, your heart whispers what your lips are afraid to say. God, are you still here? The silence can be deafening. It feels like knocking on a closed door that no one intends to open. You begin to replay your choices, searching for the mistake that must have made him pull away. You start to wonder if maybe you've failed, if maybe his love has turned to disappointment. But that's not who he is. God's silence is never abandonment. It's preparation. It's the sound of heaven rearranging things beneath the surface, in ways your heart isn't ready to see yet. You see, we often equate God's presence with movement. When prayers are answered, when doors open, when we feel peace, that's when we say, He's here. But what if He's equally present in the pause? What if the silence you're hearing is actually the sound of Him holding everything still until it's safe for you to move again? Sometimes the holiest thing God can do for your soul is to quiet the noise. Because only in silence do you start to recognize the difference between your voice and his. When life is loud, you can't always tell where your will ends and his begins. But in the stillness, in that slow, aching quiet, the truth starts to rise to the surface. The silence isn't punishment, it's purification. It burns away what's false. It clears out what's cluttered. It humbles the heart until all that's left is honesty. You stop performing faith and start living it. You stop asking for control and start asking for closeness. You stop needing the answers and start needing the presence. It's strange, but when you finally stop demanding that God speak, you begin to hear him everywhere. Not in words, but in whispers. You hear him in the way the morning light touches your skin. You hear him in the space between your breaths. You hear him in the memory of every moment he carried you before. And suddenly, the silence doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels alive, filled with peace you didn't earn and strength you can't explain. The truth is, God's silence is often the space where faith learns to breathe. If he spoke too soon, you'd cling to the answer instead of to him. If he moved too fast, you'd mistake deliverance for love. But when he waits, when he holds you in stillness, that's when you learn to trust without conditions. You learn that his love doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it simply stays, unmoving, unchanging, unshakable, like the air that surrounds you, unseen but sustaining. You realize that what you called silence was really his arms, holding you so close that words became unnecessary. And one day, when you look back on this quiet season, you'll see it differently. You'll realize that it was never empty. It was full of protection you didn't recognize, full of direction you didn't notice, full of grace that was silently writing your next chapter while you waited in the dark. So if the silence feels unbearable right now, don't run from it. Sit with it. Let it teach you what noise never could. Because even in stillness, God is speaking, not in explanations but in endurance, not in answers but in assurance, not in volume but in love. Heaven's silence is not a void. It's a vow. A promise that says, I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still here, and I'm working, even when you can't hear me. The detour that saved you. You didn't see it at the time. You couldn't have. All you knew was that the door you prayed for never opened. The job didn't come through. The friendship drifted away. The dream you built your hope around began to fall apart right in front of you. You thought it was punishment, failure, the end of everything you had believed in. But now, as you look back with clearer eyes, you begin to realize that wasn't rejection. That was redirection. It wasn't the road closing on you. It was heaven rerouting you towards something your heart wasn't ready for yet. Because that's how God works sometimes. He saves you by breaking your plans. He protects you by delaying your dreams. He loves you too much to let you build your peace on something temporary. When everything collapsed, you thought he was silent. But what if the silence was the sound of him pulling you out of harm's way? You called it loss. He called it rescue. You begged for what you thought you needed. He gave you what would actually sustain you. It's only when the dust settles that you see it. How precise his timing was, how gentle his no really turned out to be. You were angry when the door closed, but now you thank him for not letting you walk through it. Because what was on the other side would have broken the very thing he was trying to heal. You see, the detours in your life were never mistakes. They were mercy in disguise. God doesn't lead you in circles, he leads you in safety. He knows the roads you can't see, the ones that look beautiful but end in heartbreak, the ones that promise comfort but cost your peace. And so, when he redirects you, it's not rejection, it's love. Fierce, unrelenting love that refuses to let you settle for less than what he designed for you. There was a time you thought you lost your purpose, but you were being positioned. Every delay you cursed became a bridge you didn't know you'd need later. Every heartbreak you questioned became a doorway for compassion to enter your soul. Every disappointment was a seed, buried, not forgotten, waiting for the right season to bloom. It hurts when God reroutes you, Because detours don't come with explanations. They come with confusion, waiting, and silence. But faith grows in that silence. And one day, the things that once brought you to your knees will make you lift your hands in gratitude. Because you'll see, the pain that felt unbearable became the protection that made you whole. Think of the moments that changed your direction, the breakup that broke you, the failure that humbled you, the door that never opened. At the time, you thought your story was ending. But now, with hindsight and healing, you can see that it was only beginning. You were being turned away from what could have destroyed you, toward what could define you. That's the paradox of divine love. It saves you through what looks like loss. It hides blessings in brokenness. It buries your plans so your purpose can rise from the ashes. And all along, you were never walking alone. You were being led, step by step, through every detour you once resented. So the next time something doesn't go your way, when the job falls through, when the timing feels wrong, when the door won't open no matter how hard you knock, don't panic. Pause. Remember what you've already learned. God doesn't destroy, He redirects. And sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the open door. It's the one He keeps closed to protect your soul. You'll know you've healed when you can look back and say, "Thank you for not giving me what I thought I wanted." Because in that gratitude, peace will bloom. And you'll finally understand that every detour was never a mistake. It was mercy, guiding you home. When faith stops being a formula. There comes a moment when your prayers stop sounding like instructions and start sounding like surrender. When you stop trying to make faith work, and you start learning how to walk in it. Because for a long time you thought faith was a formula. Pray enough, believe enough, wait long enough, and eventually things would align. But life doesn't always follow that equation. You did everything right, and still, things fell apart. You gave, you served, you trusted, and yet the outcome wasn't what you expected. And that's when the disappointment sets in, not just with life, but quietly, painfully, with God Himself. You start to wonder, did I do something wrong? You question your worth, your prayers, your purpose. You assume maybe your faith wasn't strong enough. But the truth is, God's love isn't a system that responds to perfection. It's a relationship that responds to honesty. Faith was never meant to be a formula. It was meant to be a friendship, a walk, not a transaction, a posture of trust, not a performance of certainty. And sometimes the reason God doesn't move the way you expect is because He's teaching you that His presence is greater than His patterns. He's not trying to fit into your logic. He's inviting you into His mystery. We want a faith that guarantees comfort, one that rewards our obedience with visible success. But God offers something far deeper, peace that doesn't depend on outcomes. He teaches us that faith isn't about control. It's about communion. It's not about getting your way. It's about trusting His way. Because true faith begins when you run out of reasons and still choose to believe. It's easy to love God when the miracles are visible, when the healing happens, the doors open, the prayers are answered. But what about when He asks you to believe in silence? What about when He says wait and gives no timeline? That's where faith stops being an idea and becomes a heartbeat. That's where it stops being a formula and becomes a fire, quiet, but unextinguishable. Maybe that's what this season is about. Not to show you what you can achieve through faith, but what faith can become inside you. It's no longer about getting something from God. It's about becoming someone through God. Someone who trusts without proof. Someone who loves without reward. Someone who stays even when the blessing looks delayed. When faith stops being a formula, you stop measuring it by results. You stop comparing your timeline to someone else's. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "Even now. Even now when I don't see it. Even now when I don't understand it. Even now when everything inside me wants to give up." That's when you begin to live from the inside out, where your peace isn't determined by what happens to you, but by what's been planted in you. And when that shift happens, everything changes. You stop trying to manipulate your miracle and start trusting the maker of it. You stop performing for approval and start resting in love. You stop treating faith as a key that unlocks results and start seeing it as a hand that holds you steady in the storm. You begin to pray differently. Less like a list, more like a conversation. Less like asking for answers, more like sitting with presence. You begin to understand that God isn't interested in formulas. He's interested in formation, shaping your heart, not your image of control. He's less concerned with fixing the path and more concerned with guiding the traveler. There's a quiet freedom that comes when you let go of the need to make sense of everything. You stop demanding that God prove himself because he already has, not through explanations but through love. You start to see that faith isn't meant to shield you from uncertainty, it's meant to help you find peace within it. And the paradox of it all is this: when you stop forcing faith to work, that's when it finally does. Because faith that needs proof isn't faith, it's expectation. Faith that survives without proof, that's transformation. That's the kind that turns confusion into clarity, waiting into worship, pain into purpose. So when the plans don't unfold the way you imagined, don't assume you're losing faith. Maybe you're just losing the illusion that faith was supposed to be predictable. And what's left, that trembling, honest, raw belief, is what heaven calls real. The heart that learns to wait. There's a different kind of strength that's born in waiting. Quiet, patient, unseen. It doesn't shout or fight, it simply stays. And maybe that's the hardest kind of faith, the one that doesn't move mountains, but learns to stand still beside them. Because when everything slows down and nothing changes, the heart begins to ache for motion. You want the story to move forward, the chapter to turn, the answer to arrive. But all you hear is that same unsettling word: wait. And at first it feels cruel. It feels like heaven is withholding something you've already earned. But over time, if you lean in rather than pull away, you begin to understand. Waiting is not denial. It's design. Waiting is how God stretches faith without breaking it. It's the sacred space where trust matures, where hope stops depending on outcomes and starts breathing on its own. Heaven's pace is slower than ours because it's deeper than ours. We count hours. God counts growth. We measure progress by motion. He measures it by transformation. When you learn to wait, you begin to see things differently. You stop asking, how long, and start asking, what are you teaching me here? Because sometimes the waiting itself is the answer, the place where your soul learns to stay rooted even when the winds of uncertainty blow. You might not see it yet, but the delay you're living through is not empty time, it's soil. And God is planting something in it: peace, patience, faith that can withstand storms. You can't rush that kind of growth. You can't force a seed to bloom before its season. You can only water it with trust and let grace do the rest. There are lessons that can only be learned in stillness. When nothing is happening on the outside, everything is shifting on the inside. The noise quiets, the striving stops, and suddenly you can hear again, not the world, not your fear, but the faint whisper of God saying, "Stay. I'm still here." Waiting reveals what your heart truly leans on. When the blessing delays, do you lose peace or do you lean deeper into love? When the plan doesn't unfold, do you panic or do you pause and pray? That's where faith matures, not in answered prayers but in unanswered ones. Because in the silence of waiting, you learn who God really is, and who you really are without the noise of hurry. Sometimes you'll look around and it'll feel like everyone else is moving forward while you're standing still. They're building, succeeding, thriving, and you're still waiting for the door to open. It hurts, doesn't it? But remember this: not all progress is visible. Some of the most powerful seasons of your life will look like nothing is happening, while in truth, everything is taking shape beneath the surface. God's timing isn't slow, it's strategic. He doesn't delay because he's distant. He delays because he's perfect. And one day, when the waiting ends, when the prayer finally turns into reality, you'll understand why he asked you to trust him this long. You'll see that if it had happened sooner, you wouldn't have been ready. The blessing would have broken you instead of building you. But now you can receive it, not from desperation but from peace. Because waiting has changed you. It softened what was hard, healed what was restless, silenced what was loud. It's made your faith quiet but unshakable. You'll realize that waiting isn't a pause in your story. It's part of the story. And when the page finally turns, you'll see how God used the delay to align everything with divine precision. He was never late. He was right on time. It just took a while for your heart to catch up with His purpose. So if you're still in the waiting, don't lose heart. Every prayer you've whispered is still alive. Every tear you've cried has been counted. Every silent day has been written into something sacred. God hasn't forgotten you. He's forming you. And one day soon, when the waiting is over, you won't just receive what you prayed for. You'll become the person who can hold it. The alignment, when things quietly fall into place. It rarely happens all at once. There's no thunderclap, no dramatic sign, no sudden revelation that explains everything you've endured. Instead, one morning you wake up and realize the ache has softened. You look around and see small pieces shifting into place, almost unnoticed, like dawn slowly spreading light across a quiet room. That's how God works. Quietly, precisely, beautifully. When His timing arrives, everything that once felt random begins to align with a grace that only hindsight can understand. You begin to notice it in the little things first. A peace that returns without reason, a door opening where there used to be walls, a conversation that feels divinely timed. There's no urgency in it, no rush. Just a steady rhythm of things finding their rightful place, like a song that was always being written, but now you can finally hear the melody. You start to realize that nothing was wasted. Not the silence, not the waiting, not even the pain. Every unanswered prayer, every lonely night, every delayed dream, all of it has been woven into this moment of quiet order. It's almost disorienting, this peace. After spending so long fighting to understand, to fix, to push forward, now things begin to move without your force. And that's when you recognize it. This isn't luck. It's alignment. It's what happens when your heart finally learns to trust more than it controls. Alignment doesn't mean everything is perfect. It means that everything is purposeful. The doors that stayed shut were never yours to open. The roads that seemed blocked were leading you away from what would have hurt you. And now, step by step, God begins to reveal how even your detours were part of His design. You'll find yourself saying, I see it now. The timing, the silence, the lessons you thought were delays. It all fits together in a way that only divine wisdom could orchestrate. Because while you were doubting, heaven was detailing. While you were pleading for answers, love was building foundations. You thought God wasn't moving, but He was moving mountains inside of you. When things begin to align, you'll feel it before you see it. A gentle calm takes the place of constant striving. The questions lose their urgency. The need to know becomes the peace of letting go. You understand that the same God who guided you through the fog now stands in the clearing with open hands saying, See, I never stopped leading you. You might not even recognize yourself at first. The version of you that once panicked at uncertainty now breathes through it with faith. The person who once demanded signs now walks with quiet trust. The heart that once doubted now rests, not because it has all the answers, but because it knows who holds them. And in that stillness, gratitude begins to rise. You thank Him not only for what arrived, but for what didn't. You thank Him for the seasons that made you wait, for the tears that softened you, for the unanswered prayers that protected you. You realize that alignment is not about getting what you wanted, it's about receiving what was meant for you all along. The beauty of this moment is its simplicity. There's no spectacle in divine alignment, just peace. The kind that sits quietly in your chest and whispers, "This was always the plan." And as you look back, you'll see that every twist, every pause, every fog-covered step was leading here, to this steady, sacred rhythm of grace. So breathe. Let the gratitude wash over you. Everything that once made no sense is slowly becoming a masterpiece. And you'll understand now. The silence was strategy. The waiting was alignment. The pain was preparation. And through it all, the hand that led you was never still. Because when God aligns things, He doesn't just rearrange your circumstances. He rearranges your heart to finally see them for what they are. Proof that even in confusion, He was always working for your good. The inner compass, God's voice within you. You've spent so much of your life searching for signs, asking heaven to write answers across the sky, to send confirmation, to make the path clear. But there comes a moment when you realize that God doesn't always speak through lightning or miracles. More often, He speaks through peace, not the loud kind that demands attention, the quiet kind that settles in your chest when you stop running. You begin to notice it, a small nudge, a gentle pull, a quiet knowing that doesn't come from logic but from love. That's His voice. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It simply invites. It invites you to trust the whisper instead of the storm. To move, not because you have every answer, but because something inside you says, "This is the way." For years you thought God's voice was somewhere out there, in churches, in sermons, in signs and coincidences. And yes, He moves through all of those things, but He also moves through you, the still sacred part of you that's been learning to rest in Him all this time. When you started to quiet the noise, the worry, the fear, the need for control, you began to hear what was there all along, the sound of His presence within you. That's why He led you through silence, through waiting, through the fog, not to distance Himself, but to draw you close enough to recognize His voice without the echo of the world. Because His voice isn't found in the chaos, it's found in communion. And now, you know the difference. You can feel it. The moment fear speaks, it shakes you. The moment God speaks, it stills you. This is the miracle of maturity, when faith moves from being something you chase to something you carry. You stop searching for external signs and start following the compass within, the spirit that aligns your heart to His. The world will still shout. Your mind will still question. But your soul knows now. It knows the sound of truth, the texture of peace, the unmistakable weight of grace. And when you find yourself facing decisions again, unsure, hesitant, afraid to take the next step, you'll remember. The same God who brought you this far will not go silent now. He speaks in your peace, not your panic. He guides through your calm, not your chaos. And when you follow that stillness, you'll always end up exactly where you're meant to be. Because His voice isn't a map, it's a melody. You don't need to see the whole sheet to follow the tune. You just need to listen and move in rhythm with love. That's what He's been teaching you all along, how to walk in harmony with His presence instead of fear. When you learn to trust that inner compass, you no longer panic when the world shifts. You no longer beg for constant confirmation, because you've learned to recognize the signature of divine peace. You begin to see that guidance was never far away. It was living inside you, disguised as intuition, as calm, as a thought that simply feels right. That's the Spirit's whisper, guiding you toward what your soul already knows is good. The more you follow it, the clearer it becomes. Not because the path suddenly lights up, but because the voice within grows louder than the noise around. You realize that guidance was never about decoding signs. It was about cultivating silence. The quieter you become, the more clearly you hear. And what you hear isn't a list of instructions. It's love. Simple, patient, unwavering love, reminding you that no matter where you go, He goes with you. And that's the ultimate revelation. You were never alone on the path, because the path was always within you. The same Spirit that once guided prophets and saints now lives in you, speaking through peace, through pause, through purpose. It's not mystical, it's relational. He doesn't need to shout. His whisper is enough. So when life gets loud again, and it will, return to this quiet place inside. You don't have to search for signs anymore. You are the sign, living proof that the divine doesn't just dwell in heaven, he dwells in hearts that dare to listen, follow the peace. That's where he'll be. The divine order, trusting the unseen timeline. There comes a day when you finally stop asking when and start whispering whenever you will. It's not resignation, it's revelation. Because you've begun to understand that the timeline of heaven doesn't move by clocks or calendars, it moves by readiness. And when the time is right, things unfold with such effortless grace that you realize why every delay had to happen exactly as it did. God's timing isn't late. It's layered. Each waiting season carries a quiet purpose. Each closed door guards a sacred lesson. Each pause rewrites something inside you. You start to see that what felt like stillness was actually choreography. Heaven was never slow. It was synchronizing. There's beauty in that precision. You meet people at moments you couldn't have planned. Opportunities appear when your heart is mature enough to hold them without losing peace. Even detours begin to make sense. The timing that once felt cruel now reveals its kindness. It's as if the entire universe had been moving pieces into place while you were learning to rest instead of rush. And you realize, faith was never meant to make life faster. It was meant to make your soul quieter. Because divine order doesn't operate under your urgency, it flows under God's eternity. What looks like delay to you is alignment to Him. What feels like waiting to you is preparation to heaven. Sometimes He slows you down because what's ahead isn't ready yet. Other times He slows you down because you're not ready yet. Both are mercy. Both are love disguised as patience. If He answered too soon, the blessing would feel like a burden. If He waited too long, hope would fade. So He moves at the exact rhythm that refines your trust without breaking your spirit. There's peace in surrendering to that rhythm. You stop measuring life by milestones and start recognizing miracles in the mundane, the conversation that healed something, the delay that protected you, the no that became the seed of a greater yes. You begin to live slower, but deeper. You start to walk as though you truly believe that nothing holy ever happens by accident. And in those quiet moments when impatience still creeps in, you remember, time belongs to the one who created it. And if He governs the stars with perfect timing, surely He can handle the unfolding of your story. You're not running late in life, you're right on schedule and grace. The divine order isn't about control, it's about trust. You don't have to know what's next. You only have to know that love is leading. And when you finally let go of the need to rush, you'll see what was there all along. That God never misses a moment. Every season has meaning. Every delay has direction. Every step, even the uncertain ones, is part of the same flawless plan. So breathe. You're not behind. You're being timed to perfection. And when the moment comes, when heaven's clock strikes now, nothing and no one will be able to stop what God prepared in secret for the soul that learned how to wait. Because divine order is never about being early or late. It's about being ready. And now, finally, you are. The view from the other side. It happens quietly, almost without you noticing. One morning you wake up, and for the first time, the weight in your chest is gone. You stretch your hands toward the light and realize that the same morning sun you once begged to see again now greets you gently. Steady, golden, alive. And as you sit in that glow, you understand. You've crossed over. You've reached the other side of what once felt impossible. It's strange to look back now. The memories that used to sting have softened. The moments that once broke you now make you breathe with gratitude. You can finally trace the invisible thread, how one delay led to protection, how one heartbreak led to healing, how the detour that confused you became the path that saved you. The storm didn't ruin you, it revealed you. And what it revealed was stronger than the pain itself. You remember how lost you felt when heaven went silent, how you questioned your worth, your faith, even your purpose. But now, with distance, you see that God wasn't silent. He was building. He was constructing peace inside of you, one unseen layer at a time. You couldn't see it then because he was working within the walls of your soul. But now, looking back, the architecture of his love is undeniable. Every unanswered prayer shines with new meaning. You no longer see them as denials. You see them as divine redirections. If he had given you what you wanted then, you would have settled for less than what he prepared for you now. You see it clearly. The pain wasn't punishment. It was protection disguised as loss. The waiting that once felt endless was actually mercy giving you time to become who you needed to be. And now the peace you carry isn't borrowed from circumstances. It's built from endurance. You survived what once convinced you that you couldn't. And that survival became sacred. You find yourself speaking to others who are still in the fog, still in the silence, still at the edge of giving up. You don't preach at them. You simply tell them what you've seen from this side. That pain won't last forever. That silence is not God's absence. You can't see it yet. But one day you'll understand why it had to happen exactly that way. You've learned something the easy seasons could never teach, how to recognize God not only in the blessings but in the breaking. You see now that his love doesn't always look like rescue. Sometimes it looks like resilience. Sometimes he saves you not by removing the storm, but by strengthening your soul to stand through it. And as you look back on the road behind you, all the twists, all the nights you thought would never end, you feel something you didn't expect. Gratitude. Gratitude for the very things you once begged him to take away. Because they shaped you. They purified your faith. They taught you that peace isn't found when everything makes sense. It's found when you finally trust, even when it doesn't. Now from the other side, you no longer need to see the full picture. You've learned to love the mystery. You've learned that life is less about answers and more about awareness. The awareness that God was there all along, in every pause, in every tear, in every unseen moment. And you realize something beautiful. The view from the other side isn't just brighter. It's wider. You see farther now. You understand deeper. You love gentler. Because walking through the valley taught you what the mountaintop never could, that grace is not found in escape, but in endurance. So when you think back on the road you walked, you no longer call it tragedy. You call it transformation, because it led you here, to peace, to purpose, to a faith that no longer needs proof. And now you can say with quiet certainty, I didn't just survive the storm. I became the calm that followed it. The peace that stays peace used to be something you chased, a feeling you thought you could earn once life finally settled. You waited for it at the end of pain, at the answer to prayer, at the resolution of confusion. But now you know, peace doesn't come after the storm. It comes during it. It's not a reward for getting through. It's the quiet presence that carries you through. This peace is different. It doesn't waver when circumstances shift. It doesn't vanish when the next challenge appears. It stays. Because it isn't built on what's happening around you. It's anchored in who's within you. You begin to notice that calm doesn't mean your life is perfect. It means your heart is protected. You no longer live in reaction to the world's chaos. You live from the stillness that God has planted inside your spirit. And that stillness cannot be shaken. There was a time when you prayed for peace like it was something external, a thing to be delivered, a miracle to arrive. But peace isn't something you receive. It's something you realize. It was always there, waiting beneath the noise of worry and the weight of control. You just needed to stop striving long enough to feel it again. Now you understand that God doesn't just give peace. He is peace. And when you rest in him, you rest in something permanent. The same presence that steadied you in darkness continues to guide you in light. You walk differently now. Slower, softer, certain that even when life shifts again, you won't lose what you've found. Because peace that comes from God doesn't fade with change, it grows deeper through it. This is what maturity and faith feels like. No more panic when plans collapse. No more fear of the unknown. No more questioning if you're falling behind. You simply trust that you are right where you need to be, not because everything is clear, but because everything is held. There's a lightness that comes with that trust, the kind that lets you breathe freely again, the kind that makes you look at the same world that once overwhelmed you and say, I'm not afraid anymore. Not because the world got easier, but because you stopped trying to carry it alone. Peace isn't about understanding the path. It's about understanding the presence that walks beside you. And once you know that presence, truly know it, you realize there is nowhere you can go where peace cannot follow. It becomes the rhythm of your days, steady as your heartbeat, constant as your breath. There will still be moments that test you, days that bring uncertainty, hours that stir old fears. But now, you no longer crumble under them. You pause, you breathe, and you return to the center, to that sacred space inside where God whispers, I'm here. That's where peace lives. That's where it stays. And the beauty of this kind of peace is that it doesn't just hold you, it begins to flow through you. It spills into your words, your presence, your relationships. You become the calm in other people's storms. You become the quiet reminder that love never left, that light never disappeared, that grace never stopped moving. This is the peace that surpasses understanding, because it no longer depends on it. It's not logical, it's alive. It doesn't ask for reasons, it simply remains. It's what happens when you've walked through enough chaos to know that nothing in this world can take away what was given to you in the presence of God. So you live lighter now, not because life got easier, but because love became stronger. And when you lie awake at night no longer begging for answers, you'll feel it. That steady hum of calm beneath your chest. The same peace that met you in the fog, the silence, the waiting. It never left. It simply waited for you to recognize that it was never going anywhere. This is the peace that stays. The peace that doesn't need to be found again, because it finally found you. The light still leads even now. After the silence, after the fog, after all the waiting, you find that the journey never really ends. Because faith isn't a finish line, it's a way of walking. It's the daily decision to trust that the same light that guided you through darkness will continue to lead you through dawn. It's quieter now, gentler, but no less powerful. You've stopped demanding signs because you've learned that peace itself is the sign. There's a calm clarity that comes after everything you've lived through, not because life suddenly makes sense, but because you no longer need it to. You've stopped chasing understanding and started following presence. And in that choice, everything becomes holy again. The slow mornings, the ordinary moments, the small whispers that remind you, love is still here. Love has always been here. You realize that the light you've been following was never just ahead of you. It was within you, reflecting the very heart of God that has carried you from the beginning. Every place that once felt dark is now proof of where that light shined the brightest. Every tear you cried watered the seeds of compassion that now bloom quietly in your soul. And every unanswered prayer became a doorway to something deeper. Not what you wanted, but what you needed. You see now that life isn't about avoiding the unknown. It's about learning to walk through it illuminated. You don't fear the fog anymore. You don't rush through the silence. You've learned to walk slower, to notice the grace hidden in ordinary days, to trust the rhythm of divine order that never truly stops moving. Because the light doesn't disappear when the road turns. It bends with you. It follows your steps, wrapping each uncertainty in a soft glow of guidance. It doesn't promise you answers, it promises you company. And maybe that's all you ever needed. Not to know where you're going, but to know who walks beside you. As you look ahead now, there's no anxiety in your pace. There's peace. The kind that hums through your spirit like a song you once forgot but suddenly remember again. The melody is simple, but sacred. Keep walking. Because every step you take in trust is worship. Every moment you stay in faith is light. The journey will still twist and turn. There will still be days when clouds cover the sky and the path feels unfamiliar again. But now you know how to walk through it, with your hands open, your heart steady, and your eyes fixed not on what's missing, but on the presence that never leaves. You carry something different now. Not answers, but awareness. Not certainty, but serenity. You carry the quiet confidence that whatever comes next, it will come wrapped in the same love that has always carried you this far. So let the light lead you, again and again. Let it remind you that confusion cannot cancel calling, that silence cannot silence grace. Even when you can't see 10 steps ahead, take one, just one, and watch how heaven meets you there. Because the story isn't over. It never was. It's still unfolding in divine rhythm, one heartbeat, one prayer, one step at a time. And through it all, the joy, the sorrow, the waiting, the wonder, one truth remains unchanged. The light still leads, always has, always will. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119:105. You don't have to see the whole road to walk in peace. Every step you take in trust is already surrounded by grace. When nothing makes sense, love still does, and that love will never stop leading you. Let His light guide your heart where your eyes cannot see, and remember, you were never walking in darkness. You were walking with the light all along.